Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Love From Lizi's February 2020 card kit. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but this is a monthly kit and her kits sell out very quickly. So if you are interested, I do have links provided in the description box below for the kit as well as the add-ons that I use in this video. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. I'm using a card sketch from Viva La Verve. This is their May 2018 card sketch. There are several sheets of cardstock included in the February kit, but I will also be using some additional cardstock from my craft room simply because I like to use a lot of layers on my cards. I selected a busier pattern paper for the background. It has all of these circles with this lovely rose in the center. And since I don't want to combine too many busy papers together, I just added some solid green cardstock and then also this tone-on-tone pattern paper. For this thin strip of white cardstock that's going across the card, I used some white pearlescent paper. And this is from the add-on pearlescent bundle. Lizi always has a few different specialty paper bundles available with colors that match the kit. So I love to add those in since they add just a really lovely touch to the card. So I just put some extra cardstock, little scraps underneath the two ends of that white pearlescent paper just to keep everything nice and even on the card. And now I'm just going to line that white pearlescent paper with some of the blue peel-offs, and this is the color that's included in the kit. And it's the pinstripe design. And then after I adhere that front panel on some of this peach cardstock, I'll adhere the card front onto a card base. And for this card, I am leaving just that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing just for some extra contrast. Now for this card, I'm going to use one of the decoupage sheets. There's 8 different sheets included, and if you really want to add some dimension, you could layer these 5-6 times. I usually stick with maybe 2 or 3 since I don't want my cards super thick. So for this card, I am just going to use 3 of the layers. And here you're just seeing me trim off the little tab since these do punch out of the paper. So I'll adhere the base piece down first that has that lovely scallop edging. And then I'm also going to use 2 of the little floral pieces. I had punched out the other large circle, but I think I'm going to hold on to that for another card. The kit includes a full sheet of foam dimensional squares. I'm using a partial sheet since I want to use up that one before I start a new sheet. So I have a few more of those tabs I'm just trimming off. And once I put the foam squares underneath, I can just line it up with that base piece of the decoupage. And then I'll be adding my 3rd layer here. So it gives that rose this really beautiful dimension. And I don't know if you can see it in the video, but all of the decoupage has a little bit of glitter finish on it as well. Several of the decoupage sheets also have a few extra punch outs. So that's where I got this hello sentiment. And I just popped that up using some more foam dimensional tape. And then I just finish off the card using the Nuvo drops that are included in the kit. So there is my finished card, and that's card number 1. So now moving on to card number 2. This is a sketch from Freshly Made Sketches. It's number 51. I selected a tone-on-tone pattern paper for the background, and my sheet wasn't quite wide enough, but that's okay because I'm going to cover up that little gap with this other pattern paper. Of this lovely floral design, and I'm going to adhere this on this peach cardstock. I also cut out a little scalloped border and then trimmed that off so I can have just that little edge. It's about 1/2 inch on the left hand side. So just go ahead and adhere that on that panel, and see now that covers up that little gap and nobody will know that was there. Then I'm going to use some of the rose gold peel-offs. This is one of my favorite colors. One of the peel-off add-on bundles has the straight rose gold mirror peel-offs, and then there's also the pinstripe. So I used one from each of those sheets just to have some different widths. So go ahead and layer this card panel on one more layer of cardstock. I thought it looked really nice to have that darker orange along with that peach color. And when I do have some small pieces of pattern paper left over, I like to put them on the inside of the card just for a little extra detail. So now I cut out a stitched square die cut using some more of the pearlescent paper, layered that on the scallop square die cut. I'm just using that scrap of cardstock on the left hand side, just keeping everything even. And now I'm using one of the wooden rose pieces that comes with the kit. So just add some liquid adhesive to the back of that, adhere that onto that square. And now I'm going to go ahead and stamp a sentiment. I have a stitched oval die cut. And just to make sure I get a nice good impression, I'm going to use my mini Misty. So I just keep the negative part where I cut out that oval. A little easier to adhere in the Misty, not having to mess with just that tiny little oval. Ink that up using some orange ink. And I did have to ink it up just a few times. So I go ahead and pull off the washi tape. And I thought about layering it with some more of that dark orange, but I think it was enough, and I really like the rose being the focal point on this card. But I am going to pop it up using some thin foam dimensional squares. And then to finish off the card, I'm using just a couple of the sequins included in the kit, and this is this dark green color. I was trying to decide if I wanted to add more than the two, since generally embellishments have to be in threes. It looks a little nicer to the eye, but I like just the two in the corner by the rose. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 2. So now moving on to card number 3. I won't be using a card sketch this time, but I am using this beautiful 6 by 6 inch stamp that's included in the kit. And I don't know if you could tell from the video, but it's a huge stamp set that's included in the kit. It's 8.5 by 11 inches in size. So for this card, I'm just going to stick with this large cover stamp, all these beautiful floral designs, and I'm going to do some heat embossing on it. If you really like to color, this would be a great stamp to ink up and color, lots of little detail. So I treated the cardstock first with some anti-static powder, and then I just used some Versamark ink, stamped it or inked it up many times, trying to get a nice solid impression. And then I'm using Love From Lizi's clear embossing powder. I love the look of clear embossing powder on darker cardstock. Now I did speed this part up quite a bit since it takes a while to emboss this whole panel, but you can just see that beautiful shine and the color starting to come through as it's all melting. So once I get all of that set, it does warp the paper just slightly, but it actually wasn't too bad. Now this panel is larger than an A2 size card, so I'm just going to trim it down enough so I can still have that matted layer. So I cut it to 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. That way I can add this gold pearlescent paper as that layer. So I think that red and the gold look really nice together. So now I pulled out another sheet of the decoupage, and this one's fun because it has 2 sets of the same banner with the love word. And the colors look really nice with this red and the gold. So I'm going to trim off those little tabs. You could probably leave them on, but I get a little fussy about that kind of thing, my crafty OCD. And I'm going to use some of the ribbon that's included in the kit, and I want to have it go right behind the word love. So I kept moving it around, and I didn't like it behind some of the busier part of that banner with the floral, but I think it looked nice just going right underneath the word love. Since that red paper has full embossing all over it, I used some score tape to adhere the ribbon. I want to make sure it's going to stay in place. And then I'm just wrapping the ends around that front and holding those in place with some more score tape. So that ribbon's not going to be coming off. And then I'm also going to put score tape on the back side of this red cardstock, simply because I did heat emboss all of it and it warps the paper a little bit. And using some really strong adhesive will make sure it's nice and flat on the card. So I'll go ahead and put my card front onto a card base, and then I can start working on this decoupage sheet. And I decided that the background banner needed to be layered as well. So I'm just putting that on some more of this gold pearlescent paper. I used my trimmer for the 2 straight ends, and then just used my scissors and eyeball the bottom part of the little fishtail banner. And then I'm going to pop all of that up using some foam dimensional tape, And this will also make sure that it's going to stay on the card since the foam tape is a little bit stronger than ATG. Once I have that on nice and firm, I can use some more of the foam dimensional squares so I can build up this little decoupage piece. So both of them are the word love, it's just that last one doesn't have the little bit of glitter outline. And then to finish off the card, I cut out a few different hearts using that same red cardstock and then also some more of the gold pearlescent cardstock. And I was going to attach them just using some liquid adhesive, and I decided to pop those up as well since I already have all of that dimension from the word love. But I'm just going to use some very thin foam squares. And these hearts are very tiny, so I had to cut some of those foam squares even smaller. And then on this very final little red heart, I am putting just a drop of liquid adhesive where it's overlapping on that gold pearlescent heart. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 3. And I love how that turned out. Look at that beautiful shine. So now moving on to card number 4. I went back to using a card sketch again. This is Viva La Verve's January 2018 card sketch. I have some kind of tone-on-tone muted paper for the background, and then I have this lovely striped paper that has just a hint of that orangish color in the background. I'm going to line that piece using some of the blue peel-offs that are included in the kit. And I always cut mine just a little bit longer and I wrap the end around, or at least most of the time. I like to have them nice and secure so they're not going to come off on the card, even though I've never had that happen before. So I'm using some more of that lovely floral paper, lining all of it in this darker orange cardstock. And now I'm going to add just some solid blue cardstock for this thin strip that goes across the card. You could also use a ribbon, but I decided just to stick with the blue cardstock. Put some scraps of other cardstock on the right and left hand side, keeping that nice and even on the card. I'll put my card front onto a card base and then also add that little piece of pattern paper on the inside of the card. And now I'm going to use one of the dies that's included in the kit. So it's this really fun die that has a birdhouse, some flowers, and also a couple little birds. So I cut it out several different times using different colored cardstock. I also have the blue circle die cut out. It's just slightly larger than this little intricate die cut. So you can see a little bit of matted edge, so I like that. And now I'm just using some smaller pieces from the other two colors. So I have the leaves and the stem with the green cardstock and then the birds in this darker orange color. And these pieces are fairly tiny, so I am using my little fussy cut scissors. That way I can make sure to cut out all of that extra little detail. Now I'll just add some liquid adhesive and start adhering all of those other little pieces in place. Putting the stems on first and then the little birds. And I had thought about cutting out those flowers in another color, but I kind of like them in the peach. And I didn't want to introduce too many colors onto this card. So I'll go ahead and pop up this little circle image using some foam dimensional tape. And then instead of having the bow on the sketch, I'm going to use one of these stickers with the sentiment that's included in the kit. And it's all in this beautiful gold foil. And then just to add a little extra sparkle, I'm using some glitter pen on both of the birds. And then I felt like that upper left-hand corner needed a little something, so I cut out this garland. This is a die that was included in one of Love From Lizi's previous mega packs. So this was perfect. It was a little bit too long, so I just snipped off, I think, 1 or 2 of the flags, adhered that onto the card using some liquid adhesive, and I did keep it in the peach color since I really wanted the little bird to be the focal point on this card. And then I just added a few drops of the Nuvo color on each of those flags. So now moving on to card number 5, again, not using a card sketch. Decided to use some more of the blue colors that are included with the pattern paper. So I have some hearts in the background and then some more of that stripe paper for that strip that goes across the middle. And then just to add a little bit of contrast, I used some more of the rose gold mirror peel-offs. You can see I left a gap. Well, that's going to be covered up later on. So this is always a great way to use up some of those smaller peel-off pieces. So I punched out a few pieces from one of the decoupage sheets, just saving a little bit of time so you don't have to watch me trim all those tabs off. Adhered the main panel down first, and now I'm just going to add the foam dimension to the back of each of these pieces. This is a very quick card. I love the decoupage. It just adds such a nice touch and it's really quick to make a card. So for this one I am doing several different layers. Although for the sentiment it's actually at the same level as that little wreath. So it's not really adding any more dimension that way. It just has a little definition between the two pieces. And then I'll pop up all of those flowers. So ending up with a total of the 3 layers, including the background. Once I get all of those in place, just a couple finishing touches. I'm going to add a small little banner just out of that same blue cardstock in the upper left-hand corner. And then just one final touch, I'm using some Nuvo Dream Drops. This is the Love Potion color. This one is not included in the kit, but I really like how it matches with the roses on this card. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 5. So now moving on to card number 6, and I'm going to do something just a little bit different. I'm going to do some ink blending. I recently attended Creativation, and a lot of the make and takes we had to do ink blending. So I thought it would be fun to finally do a little bit more on video. So I have 3 different colors of Distress Oxide inks. I have the Shaded Lilac, Seedless Preserves, and also Mermaid Lagoon. This is not the same colors that are included in the kit, going way outside. So I have a larger panel and I just blended all of those together. And this one doesn't matter if you get a really good blending because you're going to cover up so much of it. So I'm using that 6x6 stamp and I'm going to ink it up all in some black ink. So this is a large stamp. You'll definitely want some kind of stamp positioning tool to make sure you get a really solid impression. So I did speed this up quite a bit with the ink blending and then also the stamping. And I have a few areas that I didn't focus on because I knew I was going to be trimming it down anyway. So lots of stamping, pressing, making sure to get a good solid impression. And I love the look of that color along with the black ink. And the ink did stay fairly wet, so I was trying to use my heat gun just to dry it and decided to do some heat embossing on it instead. So I did add some more of the clear embossing powder. So I didn't show that part in the video. So now I'm just adding some white pearlescent paper to the bottom portion of the card, lining it with some silver moon dust peel-offs. I'll just wrap the ends around the back and then I'll put that panel onto some black cardstock that I cut out this scalloped rectangle die cut. I just love the contrast with all of that color and the black. And then I'll adhere my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white cardstock showing. Now for the sentiment, I used the little leftover portion that was mostly the blue that I did all of that ink blending. So I cut out a circle die cut using that leftover piece, and then I stamped the sentiment, "You are a true miracle," just using some black ink. And then I'll layer that with a scalloped die cut. I'm just going to pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. When I did all of that ink blending, there was more blue coloring, but once I cut it down, not very much of that showed. So it's kind of nice to be able to add in that blue again. And then to finish off the card, I'm just putting a small banner in that upper right-hand corner and then adding a few of the Nuvo drops that are included in the kit. I love how this card turned out. I think it's one of my favorites. So there is the finished card, and that is card number 6. So now moving on to card number 7. I'm using a sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 529. And the measurements included on the sketch have it designed as a skinny card, but I did alter those slightly so I could still have an A2 size card. For the background paper, I have this white sheet with a bunch of little roses and a light blue. And then I'm using just a scrap of that other rose paper that I used on a previous card. And then I'm just layering all of these pieces in the blue cardstock that's included in the kit. And I just have that same blue cardstock for that strip going across the card, using a few of the silver moon dust peel-offs. Adds a little bit of contrast. And I'll use some of the scrap cardstock just for that one side of this pattern paper where it's going off the edge to keep it nice and even. Go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. I'll add that little tiny scrap of pattern paper on the inside of the card, and now I'll start working on the focal point. So the other die that's included in the kit is this darling little watering can with some flowers growing out of it. I used 3 different cardstocks to cut out this little image. I have some silver mirror, I think it's satin cardstock for the watering can, and this is from one of Love From Lizi's previous add-on packs. I always save those tiny little scraps because they come in handy for something just like this. And then for the stems and the leaves, I'm using some of this mint pearlescent paper. And then I just have that same peach color for the flowers. I just trimmed off all of those pieces. I'm just kind of building them together and then adding the flowers on top. So the only thing that really has any dimension are the flowers. I'm just going to adhere all of that in place using some liquid adhesive. So I decided not to pop up this square anymore, but I am going to put just a little piece of thin foam dimension on the upper and lower right hand corners, just so it keeps it nice and even on the card. And then I'll use some ATG for the other side. And then for the sentiment, I'm going to use another one of the stickers that's included in the kit. These do have a little piece of foam dimension on the back. So I went ahead and pulled that off because otherwise it would have been uneven on the card. And I'm just going to put some small foam squares on the left-hand side of that sentiment, keeping it nice and even on the card. Then I'll just use a little bit of liquid adhesive on the right-hand side of that sentiment, adhere it to the front of the card. And then to finish this off, just adding a few Nuvo drops with the blue color that's included in the kit. So there is the finished card, and this is card number 7. So now moving on to card number 8. This is the sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 505. And if you are interested in any of the sketches that I showed during this video, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is listed in the description box below. So for this card, I'm using a beautiful floral paper for the background, and then a little more muted design for that wider strip going down the middle of the card. I'm just going to add some rose gold peel-offs along the edge to add that lovely shine and contrast. And I didn't need to put a long piece on the right-hand side since that top portion is going to be covered up by this banner. And I cut this out using some of the mint green pearlescent paper. All that layered in this dark orange cardstock. Adhere that to a card front, add my little pattern paper strip on the inside of the card, and then I pulled out some more of the decoupage. So this card I have the sentiment, it's a little something. Thought that was a nice general sentiment, and I'm putting that in the lower right hand corner, and then the roses are going to go in that upper corner just to add a little extra embellishment. And I'm not going to do a lot of extra dimension on it. I'm just using the 2 pieces for most of the decoupage. This larger flower, I'm actually just going to pop it up using some regular foam dimension, and it won't have another layer. And then the smaller rose will have just one additional layer. And then to finish off the card, I pulled out the sequins, just sticking with that dark green color. I'll put just a few of them around the upper and lower corner. I'm just trying to figure out placement, and I do add just one more on the left side of that large rose. Adhere those in place using some liquid adhesive. And then I had a little bit kind of sneaking out from underneath one of the sequins, so I just wiped that away with some scrap cardstock. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 8. And now moving on to card number 9. I won't be using a card sketch this time. I'm using the mint green pearlescent paper for the background, and then I have a banner cut out of this floral paper. I'm just going to layer all of this in the dark green cardstock that's included in the kit. And on this little banner piece, I'm actually going to make a shaker card. The little birdhouse die is going to be the window of the shaker. So first I cut out a slightly smaller circle using another circle die, and then I'll adhere the acetate sheet to the back side. And now I'm going to build up my little shaker window. I cut a long strip of foam dimensional tape, folded it in half, so now I have the thickness that I need for my shaker. And then if you pull off the backing of both sides, the foam tape is really easy to manipulate around this circle opening. And then I'll just use the extra pieces of foam tape for the rest of this little banner. That way I don't have any parts that are sagging on the card. I'm just cutting little pieces here and there, filling in all of these little gaps. And then I'll lay this little shaker banner on the card so I can figure out where I want to put my sequins. Just use my little spoon to put some of those sequins in the center, kind of push them all together, and then I can line up the open window of the shaker. So I can get all of those sequins trapped in place. And I did use some anti-static powder just on that outside edge of the foam dimensional tape, just to make sure that those sequins aren't going to stick inside the shaker. So I cut out the little birdhouse, die cut just using some of the green cardstock, put some liquid adhesive on the back side, and then just adhere it right on top of that shaker window. Now I'm using some of the ribbon that's included in the kit. The sentiment on it is "You're Lovely," and it's just repeated along the bottom in this beautiful font. I put a piece of score tape on the bottom to adhere that ribbon, just wrap the ends around the back. And then just to add a little bit of contrast, I'm using some green mirror straight peel-offs. This is the wider version. Just tuck the ends behind, put some score tape just to make sure those aren't going to open up at all, and then I can add some ATG to the back side. Adhere this onto my green cardstock for a layering. Then go ahead and put this panel onto a card base. And for this card, I am having that little bit of the card base showing. Sometimes I have it shown, sometimes I don't. It depends on what paper I have for the background of the card. If it's usually a lot of white, I don't like to have that extra white border, but if there's not as much white, sometimes it just looks really nice. So just to finish off the card, I cut out a few flower die cuts in this peach cardstock, and then I just add a little Nuvo Dream Drop in the center of each of those flowers. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 9. Now moving on to cards 10 and 11. I'm actually going to make more than 10 cards for this video, since I decided at the very beginning I was going to use up all of that beautiful pattern paper that's included in the kit. The sketch is from OWH. This is number 217. Now I will be only showing one of the cards from this sketch. So I have some pattern paper for this longer strip, and I'm using some peel-offs, just put them all the way to the edge of the paper, and then I'm using a little X-Acto knife and just kind of mitering the corners just to give them nice clean edge. I'll go ahead and layer this in some pink cardstock, and this is the cardstock that's included in the kit. I love how some of the pattern paper has this really soft coloring, and then other has that bold orange, kind of a reddish orange color. It's really nice variety. So this card is definitely on the softer color palette. So I'm doing a double layer, following this sketch fairly closely for this design, using some white pearlescent paper and then also some of that pink cardstock. Add that little strip of pattern paper on the inside. And now I'm going to pull out one of the sentiment stamps that's included in the kit. I'm using some gray ink. The sentiment is "Storms Never Last Forever." Lizi always has such a beautiful fonts for her sentiments. I'm going to layer that on some pink cardstock, cut a little fishtail on the bottom, adhere this to the card, And so many of my cards have a ton of dimension. I decided this set was going to stay fairly flat. Makes it much easier to mail. You don't have to do any additional postage. And then instead of the little circles that are on that right hand side, I cut out some tiny little hearts. This was a die that was included in a previous Love From Lizi kit. And I'll just finish off the card using some Nuvo drops. Put 3 of them in that upper left hand corner and just a couple of them around the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and you can see the very opposite colors in that second version. And in that second card, I used some glitter paper for those hearts just to add a little bit of sparkle. So now moving on to my next set of cards. I'm going to be making 3 this time, but I'll only be showing the process of 1. This is a sketch from Freshly Made Sketches. It's number 400. I have 2 different pattern papers, some floral design for these outside strips, and then also this pattern paper with the sentiment love all over it. And just to add a little bit of contrast between those 2 fairly busy papers, I'm going to use the straight peel-offs in the rose gold mirror color. That adds that beautiful shine and then some nice contrast. Go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. And I'm going to use some more of the decoupage. So for this piece, there's a tag, and it has the sentiment with love. So I thought that tied in really nicely with the sentiment on the paper, on that pattern paper. I pulled out a piece of twine from a previous Love From Lizi kit. Just tied a bow through the top portion of that tag, and then I'm going to pop that up using some foam dimensional tape. And I'm really not following this sketch very closely. Mainly following it for like that background papers, the little skinny strip on the top and bottom, and then that wider strip. So I put that tag just slightly crooked. I thought it added a little bit of interest, and then using some of the decoupage pieces, layered up the sentiment just one time, and then also used one of the leftover decoupage flowers, added some foam dimension underneath that, and then finished off the card with some Nuvo Dream Drops. And here are the other 2 versions. And as you can see, the card on the left, I made a vertical version of the sketch simply because the scraps that I had left over wouldn't work horizontally. So that's a nice thing about card sketches. You can alter them to work for you. So now moving on to my final set of cards. This is cards 15 through 17. I really don't have a lot of pattern paper left at this point, so this is a very common sketch that I use. It's OWH sketch number 154. It's perfect when you just have these small little pieces of pattern paper left, because you can cut a 1.5 inch circle and use 4 different pattern papers, or you could use the same on one card. And for this bottom strip, I'm going to use some more of the ribbon that's included in the kit. Just use some score tape to adhere that in place. And the background paper is some more of the white pearlescent paper, and I just dry embossed sort of a quilted pattern in the background. I'm going to use some of the straight rose gold mirror peel-offs right around the ribbon just to add that lovely shine. Tuck the ends around the back and adhere those in place using some more score tape. And then I'll adhere this panel onto that layered cardstock. Using lots of adhesive. I always add a little bit extra whenever I have a dry embossed image. I'll put my card front onto a card base. And instead of using that circle element of the sketch, I'm going to use one of the wood pieces that's included in the kit. There are 2 of these tags. It's painted on one side. You could always flip it over if you don't want that sentiment or design and use the other side. But I really like the sentiment and that the colors match perfectly with the pattern paper. I did use some blue twine from my stash just to tie the bow on the top. And then I adhere it to the card using some liquid adhesive. And then just some finishing touches. I'm going to add some more of those hearts. So I have 3 different sizes, and I cut these out using some of Love From Lizi's glitter cardstock. It's a really pretty color. The background looks more orange, and then the glitter has a little bit of a red look to it. So I thought it matched beautifully with the rest of this card. So I'm just popping those up using some thin foam squares, putting them around the sentiment. And here are the other two cards I made using the same sketch. On one of them, I used a decoupage flower in the center, and then the final, I used the last of that wood tag. So now here's just a quick recap of the 17 cards I made using Love From Lizi's February 2020 card kit. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but her kits sell out very quickly, and I've been told that this one is running very low. If you are interested, I would suggest not waiting. I have provided links in the description box if you would like to purchase this kit. Now here's everything that I have left over. There is a little bit of cardstock, not a lot. Very little pattern paper, just those 3 little pieces. And then out of the decoupage, I have 5 used sheets, and I still have 3 that I haven't even touched at all. Most of those sentiment stickers, most of the sheet of the peel-offs, and then probably over half of the sequins. I have lots of the ribbon, 1 more of the wooden pieces, then the 2 dies, the Nuvo drops, and then of course this beautiful stamp set. And I think I only used maybe 4 or 5 of those stamps, so I'm looking forward to using it again in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.